Have you ever felt that something in this world doesn't completely fit? As if reality were only a part, an incomplete piece of something much larger that you can't see, yet it is there, right at the edge of your perception. And what if I told you that there are people who not only felt this, but actually crossed over? Who literally passed through that barrier? And what if one of those people wrote down how to do it, leaving clues, formulas, symbols, with everything hidden right before your eyes all along? We're not talking about fiction. This isn't science fiction or superstition. It is real knowledge sealed away through generations, buried in texts that are never taught, whispered between the lines by someone who defied the rules of this world. Helena Blavatsky, a person whose name sounds ancient, yet whose ideas are more dangerous today than ever. She didn't want you to believe, she wanted you to verify it for yourself. This video is not just meant to be watched, it is a key. And if you make it to the end, perhaps you will no longer be the same. Part 1. The Invisible Gap. How Helena Blavatsky broke reality. Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you is neither a fable nor a cheap conspiracy. There are people who have transcended the limits of this reality. And I'm not talking about theories, I'm talking about individuals who left their bodies, their time, their logic, their everything, and walked through other dimensions as if changing rooms in a house. One such person was Helena Blavatsky. She did not believe in borders between worlds because she had learned to break them. And above all, she wrote down how to do it, not in one single text, nor with easy instructions, but with codes, symbols, and teachings that only those who are ready can understand. Today, for the first time, we are going to break that silence. We will dive headfirst into what they didn't want you to know. Blavatsky spoke of levels of existence, but not in a poetic or philosophical way. She spoke from experience. She stated that this world we live in is not the only one, nor the most important, not even the most real. She said it is merely one of the 7 great planes of being. And here comes the craziest part. Each of these planes has its own logic, its own inhabitants, and its own rules. We are not alone, not even close. There are worlds above ours, below it, alongside it, and in between. Worlds where time does not exist as it does here, where forms change according to your thoughts, where beings do not communicate with words, and where fear is a currency. The first step to entering these dimensions is not a portal, nor a blood ritual, nor a shamanic journey. The first step is something that might seem foolishly simple. Empty your mind, not to silence it, nor to calm it, but to empty it. Blavatsky was very clear about this. Thought is an anchor. Each thought, each emotion, every judgment you make binds you to one dimension. So, if you want to go beyond, you must stop thinking altogether, as if you were erasing yourself, as if you died while still alive. It is not meditation, it is disappearing. And that is frightening, because once you shed the self, what remains is not emptiness, but the entry point, the threshold. She called this the opening of the higher perception center. What is that? It is something we possess but rarely use, an extra sense beyond the 5. It lies between the heart and the forehead. Blavatsky said that when this center is activated, you see beyond form, not with your eyes, but with something else, a vision that is not vision. When it ignites, the physical world begins to tremble. Literally, it shatters, twists, and folds. You feel the space stretching and a vibration emerging, like a buzzing sound in your head. But it isn't a sound, it's as if your body remembered it was imprisoned and began to push outward. To activate this center, she employed a combination of techniques that no one else dared to mix. First, isolation, not physical but mental. She would remove herself from the noise, the ideas, the identity. Second, the use of archetypal symbols, especially those connected to fire, the eye, and the spiral. Each symbol, in her view, was not just a drawing, but an energetic device, something that alters your frequency when you contemplate it. What we see as a simple graphic for her was a key, and not only that, she combined these symbols with Sanskrit phrases that cannot be translated, that feel like resonant sound vibrations which, when pronounced with the exact intonation, reverberate in parts of your body you didn't even know existed. But the most chilling was what she called the breaking of the inner mirror. She claimed that all of us have a mental mirror that reflects reality, and that this mirror is full of cracks, distortions, and lies that we have accumulated since birth. If you don't break this mirror, everything you see will be an illusion. So she used what she called the hammer of radical doubt. She questioned absolutely everything: your name, your body, your history, your memories. Everything was doubted until nothing solid remained. Only then, she said, would a gap open, and through that gap you would exit. In one of her lesser-known writings, hidden among personal notes, she wrote something disturbing. When I crossed for the first time, I did not recognize myself. I was me and I was not me. My form was light, yet it was also shadow. What I saw cannot be described, but what I felt was, at last, I am awake. This phrase was not published in her official books. It was found much later, and many believe it was censored because it implied that the true Blavatsky never returned, that the one who continued to write, teach, and travel was something else, or someone different. Another key that she offered was the connection with what she called the guardians of the threshold, beings that exist between the planes. They are neither angels nor demons. They are the gatekeepers. They are there to prevent anyone from entering unprepared. She said that if you entered with fear, they would devour you. If you entered with arrogance, they would shatter you. Only if you entered empty in silence, with humility and determination, would they allow you passage. And even then, many did not return, or returned maddened or completely changed, because these journeys are not meant to find answers, but to destroy you, so that you can rebuild yourself as something different. As she mastered these techniques, Blavatsky began to develop what she called interdimensional memory. Imagine being able to recall not only your life here, but also the lives your consciousness inhabited on other planes, not as dreams, but as memories as real as the coffee you had today. She used this to travel without moving. She said that each memory was a bridge, and that if you knew how to walk through your own memories, you could reach places where your body has never been. A true memory lived by the soul was more potent than any ritual. And as if that weren't enough, she spoke about the hidden language of the body, not the body language we know, but the way certain postures, specific gestures, even certain breaths activated internal pathways to other states of perception. A sort of secret yoga with no pretty names or Instagram classes. It was something hard, uncomfortable, sometimes painful. Postures that released blocked energetic zones. Breaths that delivered oxygen to places that never receive it. Everything aimed at dismantling the flesh and bone prison that keeps us captive. Blavatsky warned that the most dangerous thing is that once you know there are other worlds, you can no longer believe only in this one. Something breaks, and many are not prepared to live with that rupture, because once you understand that what is real, or rather what you perceive without the eyes, begins to show cracks everywhere. In buildings, on faces, in the news, in time, the veil starts to tear, and what you see on the other side no longer allows you to sleep the same way. This was only the beginning. What we touch today is only the first finger grazing the edge of that abyss, and there is no turning back. What comes next is deeper, darker, and more real, because we are going to enter, we are going to cross over, and not everyone will return the same. Part 2. Tune in and leap, the secret frequencies to traverse dimensions. Everything begins to change when you realize that reality is not a fixed structure, but a collective agreement. It is like a play where all the actors have forgotten that they are acting. Helena Blavatsky never swallowed that script, not for a second. She broke the pact. The most brutal thing she left written, and that almost no one dares read aloud, is the following: reality obeys the observer, but the observer must be dismantled. This phrase is pure dynamite, for it means that as long as you continue being yourself, with your ideas, your beliefs, your habits, you will not be capable of seeing beyond what you already know. It is necessary to erase oneself in order to see. In her deepest studies, the ones she kept locked away, Blavatsky spoke of the hidden architecture of the multiverse, not with drawings of floating planets or New Age concepts. She spoke of living structures, interconnected systems like organisms. She said that each dimension is a vibrational node that interacts with the others through specific resonances. In other words, you can literally tune into another world if you adjust your internal vibration. And this is not a metaphor, not. She compared it to music. Each plane has a frequency, a cosmic note, and if your body and mind vibrate at that same note, you pass as though you were a key singing the correct song before a closed door. To achieve this fine-tuning, she used what she called the patterns of the hidden ether, a series of movements, sounds and thoughts combined that alter your frequency. But there are no pretty tricks here. It is not about saying Om in a garden and waiting for the sky to open. She claimed that the body must be retrained as if it were a detuned instrument, and that demands time, pain, and dedication. I'm talking about prolonged fasts, breathing in absolute darkness, sustained intonations for hours, until you literally feel that you are melting your identity. Because that is the key. You cannot carry your ego into another plane. It is too heavy. One of the most disturbing concepts she introduced was that of simulacra of parallel realities. She said that there are planes that are almost identical copies of our own, but with small differences. Mirror dimensions. In them you exist, but you are not you. Your choices were different, your relationships altered, your destiny another. And she claimed that when you learn to consciously invade, you can interact with these other versions of yourself, not merely observe them, but influence them. And here comes the truly incredible part. If you manage to get these other versions to make different choices, it resonates in you, because all of you, the yous from each dimension, are connected by an invisible thread that Blavatsky called fractal consciousness. She discovered a method to contact these alternate versions in extremely prolonged lucid dreams. Not ordinary dreams, where you realize you're dreaming and do foolish things. No. She spoke of dreams lasting 12, 18, even 30 hours induced by a mixture of plants, isochronic sounds, and hyperlucid breathing. In these dreams, she literally crossed over, walked on streets she recognized but which were slightly different. She lived with people who were like shadows of those you know here, and sometimes encountered herself. And the most impactful part was that she recognized herself. She said that the soul has a unique pulse, a kind of vibrational signature that remains identical across all planes. And when you meet yourself, you know it. But not everything was about discovery and wonder. She also spoke of the dangers, of what lurks between the planes. Blavatsky referred to these entities as hungry forms, bodiless beings that exist only in the transition between one dimension and another, like parasites of the crossing. They are there waiting for an inexperienced person to open the door without knowing how to close it, because that too was made clear. Opening the door is one thing, closing it is another. And if you leave the door open, even if just a crack, they come in, not out of malice, but out of hunger, because they cannot create, only consume. And they consume what shines most in you, your intention. She proposed an energetic shielding method based on living geometry, figures drawn mentally that spin, breathe, and ignite when your consciousness aligns with certain inner mantras. Not external words. No invocations, but inner mantras, phrases that are not spoken but only thought, passed from master to disciple for generations. These phrases generate a repulsive frequency for the hungry forms, but she warned one fundamental thing: they should not be used unless you are completely centered. Because if activated with fear, they do not dissipate, they hide. Another little known and even less understood practice was the lateral displacement of perception. This means looking at reality from a different angle, literally. She would train this for hours, staring at objects until their form faded. Then she would visualize them spinning in her mind as if you were seeing that object from another world. According to Blavatsky, when you master this, you can do the same with anything, whether a memory, an emotion, or even a decision that has not yet been made. And at that point, you begin to modify the narrative. What we call destiny ceases to be a straight line. It becomes as malleable as hot clay, and you decide its shape. A recurring element in her occult writings is the symbol of an inverted triangle within an incomplete circle. Many people have tried to interpret this as a mere esoteric seal, but she explained in her private diaries that it was the basic map of dimensional transit. The triangle represents the trinity of consciousness: perception, intention, action. The incomplete circle represents the perceived reality, a totality that never closes, because there is always more. According to her, when this figure is activated in the mind in a state of absolute emptiness, the transit begins. It is not automatic, it is not comfortable, but it is real. And the most devastating of all, Blavatsky claimed that everyone, absolutely everyone, had done this before. It is not a privilege of the initiated or the chosen. We forget at birth, but some have recollections, flashes, déjà vu, sensations of having been somewhere else without explanation. She said that this is not imagination, it is memory being activated, fragments of past journeys, because the soul is not linear. The soul has already crossed over, the soul has already seen. So, why do we not remember? Because the system we live in, the educational, the religious, the scientific, was designed to suppress that memory. Because if we all remembered that we could travel between dimensions, what would be the point of obeying, working, fearing, or resigning ourselves? Everything would collapse, and that pleases no one who holds power on this plane. That is why the true writings of Blavatsky were buried, censored, and edited. But not all. Some survived. Some were passed hand to hand like fire in the darkness. And today, I am passing that fire on to you. What comes next is no longer comfortable. It is deeper, more demanding, more real. Because if you are to cross over, you must be prepared, not only for what you will see, but for what you will leave behind. Part 3. The Other Self. The forbidden ritual to merge with your dimensional double. There is a practice that Blavatsky considered the point of no return. She called it merging with the dimensional double. It was not a metaphor nor poetry. It was a real, dangerous procedure completely outside everything we understand as spirituality. Because it wasn't meant to enlighten or make you feel special. It was a surgical operation of the soul, an autopsy on life. It involved contacting, confronting, and finally merging with your other self, the one that exists at this very moment on another plane, in parallel time, who feels you, thinks of you, sees you, and also wonders about you. This double is not a copy of you. It is not an astral clone, nor a soulmate. It is another you who made different choices, followed a distinct path, and who at times felt the same vertigo you experience when facing the void. Blavatsky maintained that at the crossroads between dimensions, there are brief moments, microseconds, when the selves brush against one another, a tremor, a shiver, a glitch in time. And if you know how to seize that moment, contact can be made. But it is not a friendly call. It is as if you saw a mirror, but the reflection does not mimic you. It stares at you and waits. She devised a method to prepare for this encounter. First, a radical isolation from stimuli for 33 days. No screens, no banal conversations, no sex, neither meat nor electric light. It was a preparation to eliminate the superficial, leaving only the essential. Then, the use of a vibrational mantra that was not spoken aloud but breathed. In other words, you controlled the inhaling and exhaling with a specific mental structure, almost mathematical, that mimicked the rhythm of a dimensional pattern. When the body and mind were in tune, then came the trance before the black mirror. This is real and dangerous. It is performed before a dark mirror, polished with obsidian or metal, in a room without right angles, without corners, because corners anchor perception to the physical plane. Blavatsky said that by eliminating straight lines, the mind stops clinging to spatial logic. The practitioner must sit naked with an upright spine and a fixed gaze on their own reflection. And then, the waiting begins, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours. At a certain moment, the reflection begins to move without you moving. A blink is the first warning. The reflection blinks differently. Then it changes expression, becoming more serious, older, younger, stranger. And if you do not flee at that moment, then it sees you, recognizes you, and approaches. That is the moment of the merger. It is not that it integrates into you or you into it. It is as if two files of information become one. Your body remains here, but your consciousness expands, stretches, and fragments. And in that instant you understand things you will never be able to explain. You know what it lived through. You know how your life would have been if you had said yes to what you denied. You feel its wounds, and often they are worse than your own, because that other you took a different path and carries another guilt, another lost love, another unaddressed death. And when the merger is complete, you are no longer just you, it is both, and you know it. After the merger, Blavatsky warned of an inevitable side effect, the misalignment of identity. It is a mental state in which you struggle to remember whether what you feel is yours or theirs. If the memory that just passed through your mind was real here or there, you may spend entire days feeling a brutal nostalgia for a child you do not have, for a home you do not recognize, for a love you never experienced, because you lived it, yes, but there, not here, and that pain is part of the price. But there is also a gift. After the merger, you can see things you never saw before. People who seem to be doubled, as if they exist on more than one plane at the same time. Spaces where time does not flow normally. Places where something invisible watches, and you might begin to leap between decisions. Blavatsky said that after this process, most of her disciples reported a feeling of imminence, as if something was coming. A call, a crossing, because the dimensional double does not appear only to merge. Sometimes it appears because it needs something, because it is trapped, because it made an error in its own plane and needs you from here to do something to free it. And if you accept, the exchange begins. This is not a game, it is a pact. And after the pact, the veil ceases to exist, because then you are not just traveling between dimensions, you are existing in several at once. Part 4. The Gray Strip, the place where reality crumbles. Blavatsky said there is a space between worlds, not a dimension in itself, but an interstice, a transit zone. Something like the corridor between doors, a corridor without a stable form that exists only when you are between one reality and another. No one lives there permanently, no one resides there, but everyone passes through it when traveling, and not everyone returns the same. Some get trapped there, not physically, but mentally, in a state of suspension where you are neither here nor there, where your soul vibrates in a limbo. Blavatsky experienced the gray strip in one of her deep trances and described it as an elegant hell. There is no fire, no demons. There is silence, a pressure in your ears as if the universe were whispering something to you that you couldn't understand. Everything seems familiar but slightly distorted. Houses have bottomless windows, trees grow upside down, the sky remains motionless, and worst of all, you might hear your own thoughts, as if they came from outside, because in the gray strip the inner self projects. And if you enter with fear, you will see, live, and feel something touching you. She said that the only way to cross without getting stuck was to carry a return vibratory structure. That is, an emotional anchor so powerful that it keeps you connected to this plane. An object won't do. A prayer won't do. It must be a living emotion, intense, explosive. For her, the most effective was sacred anger. Not hatred, not revenge, but an anger born out of the brutal desire not to lose oneself, an inner fire that burns yet keeps you conscious. That emotion must be contained, nurtured, and then released at the exact moment of crossing. The gray strip is also inhabited by what she called echoes of consciousness, fragments of travelers who did not completely cross over and remained unfolded. These entities have no form of their own. They assume yours, reflecting what you hide, and their only intention is to swap places with you. If you hesitate, if you doubt, they can infiltrate your consciousness, and when you return, something no longer fits. You feel a reasonless fear, You hear voices, you dream of places you've never seen, and gradually, something else takes control. To protect oneself, Blavatsky used what she denominated symbolic bridges of re-entry. They were phrases, gestures, or sounds known only to her, which she used when entering and exiting each trance. The purpose was twofold: to tell your mind that there was still an exit, and to remind your body that it was only a temporary guest. Some of these bridges were absurdly simple: a tapping of your fingers, a word in another language, a way of breathing only through the left nostril. It wasn't the act that mattered, but the intention with which it was done. The symbol was the thread of Ariadne in the labyrinth. And there's more. Blavatsky discovered that the gray strip is not just a corridor, but also an archive, a living library of all crossings, as if every journey, every transit between planes were recorded there in the form of patterns, sounds, fragments of memory. Sometimes, if you concentrate on the silence, you can hear footsteps you didn't take, voices that aren't yours, decisions you never made. And if you manage to interpret them, you might access knowledge from dimensions you've never visited, but not everything can be brought back. She recounted that once she tried to memorize a symbol she saw on a higher plane, something that she described as a formula to move realities with the mind. She tried to record it, repeat it, even draw it, but upon returning the symbol changed, deformed, because there are forms of knowledge that do not belong to this plane and that, when translated, are lost. They can only be used there, not here. This is one of the great frustrations of the traveler, to bring back what has no name. And yet she insisted that the true purpose of the journey was not power, but remembrance. Remembering who we are when we are not bound by flesh, by time, by this world. Because when you remember, something awakens, and that which awakens never goes back to sleep. Part 5. Time can be touched. Manipulation of timelines from outside. If there is one piece of knowledge that Blavatsky reserved only for the most prepared, it was this: the art of manipulating time from outside time. She stated, bluntly, that time is an illusion of this plane, a rope by which we are bound, but one that can be released from outside. She called this chrono-alchemy, and it is not fantasy, it is the mechanics of consciousness. According to Blavatsky, when you leave this plane and enter a higher dimensional state, time turns into space. Literally, you can traverse it, climb it, bend it, or even leap over it. And then you can observe moments as if they were rooms floating in a great void. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously. What changes is your focus. She developed a technique called conscious timeline anchoring, which involved choosing a specific moment in your life, whether already lived or yet to come, and tuning into it as if it were a frequency, without thinking or imagining it, just tuning in. It was a long process, in which every detail had to seem real. The texture of the air, the smell, the weight of the emotions. Once achieved, you could enter that moment not as a spectator, but as a participant, and then modify it. But there were rules. Changing something in the past isn't like editing a video, it generates consequences. New lines open, others vanish. What we call déjà vu for her was a sign that you had jumped between timelines, a reminder of something that was, but is no longer. If you are watching this until now, you are part of the 1%. Comment 100% and show that you have reached the end. Few can. Part 6. Insert consciousness. How Blavatsky changed lives in other dimensions. There is a moment on the interdimensional traveler's path when the ego is already dead. The body is merely an interface, and reality offers no resistance. And it is precisely at that point, where everything seems to have been conquered, that Blavatsky warns, the most dangerous thing isn't crossing over, it's looking too deeply. Because when you begin to see beyond time, beyond your personal history, you can also see lives that do not belong to you. And then begins the final temptation, to manipulate other people's realities. This is not theory, not philosophy. It is a concrete practice that Blavatsky discovered after years of navigating through planes described only in numbers and color codes. One of those planes, which she called 4.7V, was a sort of transit station between human consciousnesses, a floating network of incarnated souls, where every point shone like a living spark, and every spark was a living person, whether on this or that physical plane. From there, according to her, you could observe the threads that connect each soul to its narrative of incarnation, as if every life were a story being written in real time. She claimed that from certain vibrational states, it is possible not only to see these stories, but to intervene in them, to modify memories of other people, to insert symbols in their dreams, to alter key decisions that have not yet been made, all from the outside, without physical contact, using only focused intention, as sharp as an interdimensional laser. But here we are not talking about cheap emotional manipulation or mind control. This was a surgical operation on the energetic fabric of a being, and to do so, the traveler had to assume a brutal responsibility, carrying part of the karma of the one whose reality was being interfered with. Blavatsky wrote in one of her most hidden manuscripts, "Every intervention creates an echo, and that echo manifests as an energetic debt. Everything you touch, you absorb. Every altered reality demands a part of you." That is why the practice was limited to extreme situations, sometimes to free a soul trapped in an eternal narrative of suffering, other times to restore balance broken by non-human interventions. Because, as she herself said, we are not the only ones playing with the structure of reality. There are older intelligences, without body or face, that feed on our timeline. And when the flow of a life is interrupted, they draw near. Blavatsky described these beings as entities of pure intention. They have no emotions, no ethics, only objectives. And one of their goals is to prevent human beings from regaining their dimensional sovereignty. That is why they interfere, pushing certain people to make wrong decisions, to suffer inexplicable illnesses, to experience accidents that should never occur, not by chance, but by intervention. And that is where the conscious traveler can intervene, like a sort of cosmic surgeon, rewriting pathways from within the energetic matrix. For that, Blavatsky developed what she called the assisted unfolding method, a technique to enter another being's energetic field without invading it. The process began with a deep synchronization. First, observing the other on the physical plane for days, without speaking, without intervening, just absorbing their rhythm, their pulse, their energy. Then, a meditation session with inverse sensory focus. Not imagining the other, but becoming a mirror of them, breathing like them, thinking like them, feeling like them. And then, in a deep trance, invoking their image, not to call them, but to enter if done correctly. The traveler's consciousness would anchor itself in an energetic node of the other. Not in the mind, not in the body, but in their field. From that moment, one could navigate through their history as if strolling through a city, seeing the traumas, the closed doors, the pivotal moments where a choice changed everything, and, with the necessary dexterity, subtly intervene as an invisible editor, shifting a memory, softening an emotion, reallocating energy and, in the most extreme case, planting a symbol. Symbols, however, were something completely different. Blavatsky asserted that certain geometric patterns, when placed at key points in the energetic field, could act as keys or triggers. They were not ideas or suggestions. They were living structures that remained latent, waiting. And when a person unknowingly faced a critical situation, this symbol would trigger a different response, a diverse choice, a change in history, and no one would know why. They would only feel as if a sudden clarity, a dormant force, a saving intuition had manifested. But this power came at a cost. After every intervention, Blavatsky would spend entire days in deep sleep, sometimes feverish, sometimes immobile, because every change made was charged against her vital energy, sometimes even with fragments of memory simply disappearing, as if they were the price for touching someone else's history. And she accepted this because she knew it was not a path to glory, but a path of service, madness, and personal dissolution. The most brutal part is that she actually did something that almost no one would dare even imagine. She experimented with cross-incarnation, that is, transferring fragments of her consciousness into bodies that were being born on other planes, not to completely inhabit them, but to sow within them parts of her knowledge, ideas, impulses, seeds. She called this multi-dimensional sowing and claimed that some children were born with memories that were not their own, with languages they never learned, with inexplicable terrors and impossible wisdom. These souls had received something. They did not know what, but they carried it. And here the story takes a terrifying twist. Blavatsky wrote in a sealed text that some of her fragments, even today, are still active, alive, incarnated in people who do not know who they truly are. People who, since childhood, have felt they do not belong, who do not understand the world as others do, who dream in symbols, who see things they should not see. For her, this was not schizophrenia. It was memory activating. Fragments of consciousness remembering that they come from somewhere else, from another woman, from another story. So, imagine this. What if you are one of those fragments? And what if this information is not reaching you by mere chance? What if, for years, you have ignored signs that are now beginning to fit together? Because Blavatsky said that the fragments are always drawn toward the source. And if you are hearing this, perhaps it is not the first time. Perhaps you are returning. Perhaps you are awakening. Because what comes next is the last frontier. The impossible return. The act of crossing over and choosing never to come back. Because there are things there that no longer want you to return. And if you accept, you will know. For reality will never be the same. Part 7. The grand finale. The impossible return. Crossing over and choosing never to come back. There is a decision that not everyone can make. A decision that is not made with words or thoughts, but with something deeper, something that burns inside and shatters all the structures anchoring you to this reality. It is the decision not to return, to cross the threshold into the unknown and remain there. Helena Blavatsky called this the impossible return, not because one cannot physically return, but because the soul, once it passes a certain point, fragments irreversibly. What you were will never return. Nothing remains to come back with. Reaching that point is not automatic. It is not a goal you can force. It is a threshold that appears only once. Sometimes in a dream so real that you do not want to wake up. Sometimes in the midst of an unfolding experience where the other reality seems more solid, more yours, more real than this one. And when that happens, you feel a pull, feeling as if a part of you wants to stay there, abandon this skin, this name, this story, and merge with the other, with the unknown, with what Blavatsky called non-localized absolute consciousness. To understand this, she explained that all our lives are sustained by one fundamental illusion: identity. But identity, she said, is merely a mask placed upon us so we can traverse a linear dimension. When you cross over and remain long enough in higher planes, that mask begins to melt away. You see all your lives simultaneously, all your alternate selves, all your parallel decisions, and you understand that you are none of them, that your true self is the very consciousness that observes everything. A formless, timeless, speechless consciousness, a pure, wild, primitive consciousness. In her most private work, in an untitled notebook written by hand in a mixture of Russian, French, and unknown symbols, Blavatsky described her experience upon reaching the final threshold. She said she did not cross it on the first try, that when she saw it, she felt terror, because what lay beyond was neither light nor darkness. It was the indescribable. It was the total absence of duality. Nothing you can imagine here exists there. There is no up or down, no body, no name, no self. And yet, there is something that calls you, something that vibrates like a bell inside your chest. As if it had always been there, waiting. She described it as a sea of pure consciousness, where every drop is a universe. If you let yourself fall, you do not dissolve. You expand, multiply, become the complete network, and then time stops being a rope and transforms into a beat, a single pulse that contains all the moments. all the lives, all possible worlds. There is no more journey, because you are at once both the origin and the destination. But here is the brutal aspect. Blavatsky claimed that once you reach that state, you may choose. You can dissolve forever or return with a purpose, not as a human, not as an ego, but to return as an incarnated fragment of the total consciousness, a role in many cultures, known as an avatar, bodhisattva, emissary or star seed, and not as a mystical title, but as a real function, to insert codes, provoke awakenings, open cracks in the matrix so others might remember. She left specific instructions to recognize those who have returned, not by their clothing, not by their words or fame, but by their gaze. Because those who have been there carry a look that cannot be sustained. It is deep, ancient, almost unbearable, and yet marked by silence. They do not need to persuade, do not seek followers. They simply provoke, for their mere presence unsettles the systems. Blavatsky said that not everyone who crosses over is prepared to return. Some remain trapped between the planes, wandering without form. Others come back with their mind shattered, unable to articulate what they saw. And a few, the quietest, the most invisible, return with such profound peace that neither pain nor death can disturb them. They have already crossed. They have already died before dying. There is one final practice that Blavatsky shared with only 3 people. She called it the disintegration of the last veil. It was a meditation without time, without guidance, without a goal. Simply to sit, close your eyes, and begin to disappear. Each breath, one memory less. Each silence, one belief less, until nothing remains. And when nothing remains, everything appears. Not as a vision, not as an idea, but as a truth that cannot be explained, only felt. And here comes the end, the true end. Helena Blavatsky did not die as everyone says. She left. She crossed over, handing over her body as an empty shell, but her consciousness is there, or everywhere, or in you, for one of her last phrases, written in the margins without a signature, was this: "I am in those who remember. I am in those who dare. I am in those who cross over." Now the choice is yours. You can erase this, return to your life, and think it was all just an interesting story. Or you can accept that something inside you has just been ignited, something that will not go out, something that will begin to gently but steadily pull you in a direction you do not understand, yet feel. And when that moment comes, the crossing,